There are two basic categories of point-and-shoot cameras, the compact and the super zoom. Now, a compact camera you can see here is a much smaller camera, will fit in your pocket. A super zoom camera generally is not going to fit in your pocket. You're going to need a camera bag, or it's going to just be a little larger. You'll have to carry it with you. So the compact camera is probably a little bit better for when it comes to convenience and size. Now, you can buy compact cameras with 6 times, 10, 20 times zoom, so there are different amounts of zoom you can buy with a compact camera, but they will go up to 30 times zoom. So if a compact camera goes to 30 times zoom, that's actually 720 millimeter zooming in. And one of the biggest lenses made for a full frame or a film camera is about 800 millimeters. So this is a lot of zoom. Usually 200 or 300 millimeter was, pretty long zoom. 720 is really zooming in there. So if we look at this photograph, here we can see a wide angle shot of the Capitol, and we can see it zoomed into 3 times zoom, 6 times zoom, and 12 times zoom. And you can see how far 12 times zoom zooms in. Here we have the illustration showing how tight 12 times zoom is. Now imagine it going to 20 and 30 times zoom. For some people who are photographing birds or really want to get things really far away, you may want to consider one of the super zoom cameras. Now, the second thing about these cameras is when you look at them, you go, oh, that compact is smaller and the super zoom is larger, so it must have a larger image sensor. Well, the thing is, both cameras generally have the same size image sensor. The super zoom will use that same size sensor because it wants to reach out further, and if it had a larger sensor, it wouldn't be able to get to the 60 times zoom as easily. So once again, image sensor size makes a difference when we're looking at the length of the lens and how much it zooms in. So you can see here that the compact camera and the super zoom have the same size image sensor. Now, this isn't always true. Sometimes compact cameras have a larger image sensor than the super zooms. So generally with the super zooms, they won't. There are some cameras which are over $1,000 which might, but as a general rule, they're going to have the same image sensor size. Now, when you're looking for a digital camera, one of the things that can be really helpful is our image sensor size chart. On this chart, we list each image sensor with all 3 names. It has the common name, the millimeter, and then the fraction of an inch and things like that. So it's really helpful when you're looking at this camera versus this one, and you look up what size image sensor it has to be able to see, oh, does that have the same size image sensor, or how much larger or smaller it is visually. So when you're looking at different cameras, being able to look and see what size image sensor, that's a bigger camera, but does it have a bigger image sensor size? So you can download this chart at our website, easyphotoclass.com. Simply go to Downloads in the menu, and then you can find this as well as a lot of other really cool downloads in the Downloads area. If you do want a larger image sensor size, you can actually find it in the compact cameras sometimes. In the compact cameras, they'll have the smaller sensor, and sometimes if you buy a more expensive one, it will have a larger image sensor. So if you are looking for a camera with a larger image sensor, sometimes you'll actually find it in the compact camera, which is smaller than the super zoom. The super zoom camera size is generally larger because of having a larger lens to zoom out longer. Now, when you find the larger image sensor size in a point-and-shoot camera, it can be confusing because with the larger image sensor size, it will go, we're only 5 to maybe 7 or maybe 10 times zoom with this larger image sensor size, whereas the ones with a smaller image sensor size will be able to zoom out to 20 and 30 times zoom. And this can be confusing, and I'm going to try to explain it simply here. The fact that the smaller image sensor size captures a smaller area, so it looks like it zoomed out more than the larger image sensor size. So when you're looking at compact cameras and you go, well, this one is 30 times zoom, and it's the same price as this one, which is only 6 or 7 times zoom. The 6 or 7 times zoom probably has a larger image sensor size than the longer zoom. And so you can decide, do I want the longer zoom or do I want less zoom with a bigger image sensor size? Now, there is one additional category in point-and-shoot cameras, which is the rugged camera. Now, this is great if you go out and you do a lot of hiking and mountain biking and things like that, and you want a rugged camera. It's also great if you drop your camera a lot. I was talking to a guy who said, I don't do a lot of outdoor stuff, but I do drop my camera a lot, and after breaking a couple of them, I just bought one of these rugged ones that, you can drop it, and generally it's okay. So if you feel like you want a rugged one, that's another category that you may want to consider when you're looking at a point-and-shoot digital camera. When buying a point and shoot camera, one of your considerations is, do I want it totally automatic, or would I like to be able to set the shutter speed and lens opening myself in addition to the automatic settings? Now, being able to set the camera to shutter priority, aperture priority, or manual is generally going to cost a little bit more. You'll probably be in the $300 plus range for a point and shoot camera. So if you want it totally automatic, you can go that way. If you want it with the additional settings where you can control shutter speeds and lens openings and things like that, you'll generally want to look at the shooting mode dial for SAM, shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual, S, A, and M, in addition to all the auto settings on the shooting mode dial. Now on Canon cameras, instead of an S for shutter priority, it'll have a TV for timer value. Instead of an A for aperture priority, it will have an AV for aperture value, and then it will have an M. So on most digital cameras, you'll see S, A, and M for shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual. On a Canon camera, you'll see TV, AV, and M. Now generally this will be on a shooting mode dial. On some cameras, they may have it built into the menu instead. So when you're looking for a digital camera, you may want to choose a totally automatic one, or you may want to choose one that's totally automatic, but also has shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual settings to let you control the shutter speed and the lens opening, to stop action, blur backgrounds, and help take photos in low light. Cell phone cameras are great, but digital cameras do have one major advantage over them. Now, I love my cell phone camera. I use it to, capture things. Sometimes, if I'm looking at a store at something, I'll take a picture just to remember it. I love it also to be creative. On my last trip to New York, I actually went down the little side street there by Times Square. There's a lot of vendors with a lot of, colorful different things they're selling, and did some really cool, really wonderful, kind of creative photos that if you want to look at them, they're on my Instagram account. So cell phone cameras, they're great. I love them, but digital cameras do have one major advantage over a cell phone camera, and that's the size of the lens. Cell phone cameras can only have a lens as tall as the thickness of a cell phone. And everybody wants a thin cell phone, so that really limits how tall that lens can be. I want you to imagine you're an engineer and the boss calls you in and says, "Got a new project for you. We're going to have you make a camera." And you go, "That sounds really cool. What are the dimensions?" And they say, "Well, it's going to be about 3/8 of an inch tall and about 1/4 inch around." And you're going, "That's a really tiny camera." And I am amazed at how, what an incredibly good job the engineers and designers have done making such a small camera take such great photos. And like I say, it's so convenient. The cell phone is always with you. Now, the one disadvantage is they have a very short lens, and that means they can't zoom out as well as a digital camera. Now, you may say, well, my cell phone, the lens zooms, and actually it isn't the lens zooming, it's what they call digital zoom. Digital zoom is where it actually crops into the image sensor and uses a smaller portion of the image sensor, and then uses software and mathematics and things to interpolate and try to make the image, still look good, even though it's using a smaller area of the image sensor. So it's digital zoom, not actual lens zoom. Now, they're doing a lot of different neat things. There's one camera that's adding a second lens, which is more of a telephoto lens, and then the other one with a wide-angle lens, and they're doing things with math and everything else that is really doing pretty good. But when you're going on vacation, you want to capture that bird that's in the tree way over there, or something far away. Or if you have a child who's playing sports, or you like photographing sports, when they're way across on the field, having a lens that will actually zoom out and give you the full image sensor size with lens zoom using the glass in the lens instead of cropping into the image sensor, you should get a much better image. Now here you can see our picture of the Capitol again, where you can see the little red square on that, and that's 6 times zoom. In the left photo underneath that, you're going to see 6 times lens zoom, where it's using the full image sensor. On the right, you're going to see 6 times digital zoom, where it's actually zoomed in on the image sensor using a much smaller area of that image sensor. Now, like I say, different cell phone cameras will have, different ways of doing this. You can check yours and see, if it does use digital zoom or how it does it. Now, if we look at the image sensor size chart here, which you can download from our website, easyphotoclass.com, just click on downloads and find it and, go download it. You can see that the image sensor size generally found, and I'm saying generally here in cell phone cameras, is a 25 millimeter image sensor. And you can see actually we put a penny on our image sensor size chart so you can compare, this is how big the image sensor is compared to this penny. So on the chart, you can see how big the image sensor is compared to the other ones. Here we're going to blow it up a little bit and just look at that one image sensor. And then we're going to do a comparison with using the whole image sensor and using the image sensor with just a little bit of image inside of it. So you can see that's where it's using digital zoom, using just part of the image sensor as opposed to lens zoom, using the whole image sensor. Now, like I say, cell phone cameras, some may use digital zoom, some may have interpolation and a whole bunch of software and things. Some have two lenses now, and who knows what they're coming up with in the future. So you may want to check out your cell phone's camera and see how it does its zoom. Generally, having a larger lens to help you zoom with is going to help you get a better picture. So love my cell phone, love taking photos with it, even being creative with it. But if I need to zoom out to something far away, like if I'm traveling or if I, am shooting sports or something like that, it's really nice to have a camera that can have a lens that is larger than, the thickness of a cell phone to be able to zoom out much further and generally get me a better image. Which camera lens has the longer zoom? Here we have a smaller point-and-shoot camera and a larger full-frame DSLR with a much larger lens. When I was teaching one of my workshops, I had one of the people say, I wish I had a bigger camera like yours with a big lens that would really zoom out there. I've just got this point-and-shoot. And I looked at the camera and I said, actually, your point-and-shoot will zoom out a lot further than the lens I have on this camera. And they're going, well, how can that be? Your lens is much bigger, so it's going to zoom a lot more, right? And I said, well, actually, it's the image sensor size that makes the difference. Here you can see we have the bigger camera and the smaller one. And the smaller camera here actually has a 30 times zoom, which equals 720 millimeter. The larger camera has a 70 to 200 zoom, and 200 millimeter is a lot less than 720. In fact, the lens on the smaller camera will actually zoom in over 3 times closer than the camera with the big lens on the bottom. If you look at the two photographs, you can see that the camera with the larger lens zoomed in, but was only able to zoom in so far, and it actually shows a larger area, while the smaller camera was able to zoom in even closer down to just that single flower at the top of the picture of the bigger lens. So how does this happen that a smaller camera with a much smaller lens zooms in farther than a bigger camera with a much bigger lens? Well, the size of the image sensor is what makes the difference. Here you can see we've added the size of the image sensor for the point-and-shoot camera and for the bigger camera. To show you need a larger lens for a bigger image sensor and a smaller lens for a smaller image sensor. Now here we have 3 actual image sensors, a point-and-shoot, APS-C, and full frame. And they've got all the electronic stuff around them and everything. If we take that away, you can see that the point-and-shoot image sensor is much smaller than even the APS-C or the full frame. So when you have a much smaller sensor, you're able to use a much smaller lens. Here you can see we have a full frame APS-C, and then we have a point-and-shoot image sensor size. So you can see how the lens needs to be larger for a full frame than it does for a smaller APS-C, than it does for a point-and-shoot camera, which has a smaller sensor. And you can see we can get the same amount of zoom using a small lens on a point-and-shoot camera compared to a large lens on a full frame camera. So image sensor size does affect lens size. Each one of these lenses will have the same amount of zoom even though they're different sizes because they're covering different size image sensors. So a point-and-shoot camera can actually zoom out farther than a big camera with a big lens because it's covering a smaller area, so it can be a smaller lens and still have a great zoom. The camera we have in the picture here has a 30 times zoom, and that equals 720 millimeter, and one of the biggest lenses they make for a digital SLR is an 800 millimeter. So a 30 times zoom will zoom just about as far as one of the biggest lenses they make for a full frame camera. Now we could actually use a point-and-shoot camera with an 8 times zoom instead of a 30 times, and 8 times zoom would equal over 200 millimeter, which would still be longer than the big lens with the big camera at the bottom. Now, if you're curious about image sensor sizes, we do have an image sensor size chart on our website in our download area that you can download. You can see here we have it with the full frame down through the APS-C and the 4/3, and then the 1 inch down to the smaller than 1 inch image sensors. So if you're buying a digital camera and you want to compare and see what size sensor it has, the image sensor size chart can be very helpful. Now in photography with digital SLRs and mirrorless cameras where you can change the lenses, they usually refer to it in millimeter. This is a 70 millimeter. This is a 200 millimeter. This is a 100 millimeter. When you have point and shoot cameras, usually they refer to them by the X, a 10X, a 20X, a 30X. To explain how they get the X, which means times, it's like a 3 times zoom, a 6 times zoom. Here you can see we have a photograph showing the widest that it can zoom, and then red lines showing where it zoomed to 3 times zoom, 6 times zoom, and 12 times zoom. What this means is that's 3 times the widest view of the camera. Now most point and shoots are either 24 millimeter or 28 millimeter. So if you have a 24 millimeter and you have a 3 times that, it'd be 3 times 24 or 72. So a 3 times zoom will zoom out to 72 millimeter. If you have a 10 times zoom and you have a 24 millimeter, that will be 240 millimeter. Here you can see we've taken the picture away and we're showing just an illustration of the widest angle, 3 times zoom, 6 times zoom, and 12 times zoom. Here you can see we actually have the widest zoom, a 3 times zoom, 6 times zoom, and 12 times zoom of the Capitol building. So you can see that 12 times zooms in pretty darn good. If you look at that original shot and we're standing in the same place and we've zoomed in to 12 times zoom, that's zooming in quite a bit. 12 times zoom with a 24 millimeter would be 264 millimeter, which is a pretty darn good zoom. Now here we're looking at 12 times zoom. Imagine that at 30 times zoom. 30 times zoom is really zoomed in. So if you're used to film cameras or used to, the millimeter, and you're going, what does this 3 times and 6 times mean? Well, basically it's that number times the widest view of your camera, which like I say, you can look up in your camera manual, but generally on a point and shoot camera will be 24 or 28 millimeter. And then you'll just multiply the number before the X times that to get the millimeter. Now another way you can go to get a larger image sensor, and actually a much larger one, is to go with a 4/3 camera. Here you can see the super zoom camera alongside the 4/3 camera, and you can see that the 4/3 camera with an all-in-one lens is about the same size as the super zoom camera. Now the thing is, when you look at the size of the image sensors for both of these cameras, you see that the super zoom has a much smaller image sensor size and the 4/3 camera has a much larger image sensor size. So if you want a larger image sensor, you may want to consider a 4/3 camera. Now these are cameras where the lens does come off, but they only come off if you take them off. You have to push a button and turn it to take it off, the bayonet mount, and when you put it back on, you turn it until it clicks, and then it's on. One thing, if you are buying an all-in-one lens, this does have a larger image sensor, and so with an all-in-one lens, it may only go to 200 or 300 millimeter, which isn't clear out to the 30 times, but it's still a really nice zoom to be able to go to 200 or 300 millimeter with the 4/3, and we're going to be talking about 4/3 cameras a little more later on. But if you are looking for a camera about the same size as the super zoom camera, you can get a 4/3, which is about the same size. It's kind of amazing, but it is a mirrorless interchangeable lens camera that has a much larger image sensor for about the same size, if size is one of the more important things to you, and having a larger image sensor size is something you'd like as well. Now, while most point and shoot cameras, the compact and the super zooms, run about, say, $150 to say $350. There are some very expensive compact and super zoom cameras out there that run to $800, $1,000, $1,200 and up, where you can often get a 1-inch image sensor, which is a larger image sensor than just the point and shoot, and you can get a really long zoom and things like that. So there are some interesting ones that if you want to spend a lot more money on a compact camera, there are some very interesting choices there you can look at as well. Now, one of the reasons you might consider a 4/3 camera over one of the more expensive, say $1,000 point and shoot cameras, is that in about 5 years, the technology will be 5 years old. And that means buying a whole new camera if you have the point and shoot where everything's built in. If you have the 4/3 mirrorless camera, you can simply take the camera body off, put on a new camera body, and you'll be able to update the technology for your camera and still keep the same lens. So there are a lot of different choices you can make. How compact do you want your camera to be? How long do you want the lens to zoom? And how large do you want your image sensor to be? And with all of this, how much do you want to spend? On some point-and-shoot cameras, as well as some digital SLRs and mirrorless cameras, you get a screen that folds out. Sometimes the screen is built into the camera, sometimes it folds out and it will tilt high or low, so you can hold the camera above your head or lower and tilt the screen to be able to take the photo without having to get to that height or getting down on your knees. You're able to tilt the screen. Some cameras also have it where it flips out and then tilts as well. If you do have one of the screens that flips out, you can also flip it around to where you put it up against the camera and it's the metal side, not the screen side. And this can be helpful if you're traveling and you don't want something to hit it and break the glass. You simply flip it around when you're taking photos. Now, some people really like the screen that flips out, and some people who do vlogging, that's where they hold the camera out and they're videoing themselves. They like to be able to flip the screen up to be able to see themselves on the screen when they're shooting. Also might be helpful if you want to do selfies with your digital camera. So you can see whether having a screen that's built into the camera or one that can flip out or tilt up or down is important to you. With newer digital cameras, there are also some that have a touch screen where you simply touch the screen to bring up the setting or adjust the setting. So you may want to see whether the camera that you're buying has a touch screen. Usually the touch screen is on cameras that cost a little bit more, so it's a feature you may have to pay a little bit more for, but it's something you may want to consider. Do you want a tilting screen and do you want a touch screen? We hope you've enjoyed these photography tips. If you'd like help getting started with your digital camera, you may want to check out our Top 10 Digital Camera Settings worksheet. Looking at your digital camera, there are lots of buttons and symbols and settings which can be confusing. Our Top 10 Digital Camera Settings worksheet will help you learn where these settings are on your camera and the buttons and dials you must use to set them. This worksheet is a great way to get started learning your digital camera. Being able to look at your digital camera and know what the different settings are and how to set them is a great feeling. Knowledge is always your best camera accessory. Download the Top 10 Digital Camera Settings worksheet at easyphotoclass.com to start learning your digital camera settings today. To go to our website, click on our logo at the top of the page for great photography downloads and workshops. To subscribe to our channel, click on our logo in the lower left to enjoy more great photography videos. You can also click on the video image in the lower right to enjoy our next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk with you soon.